My fiancée didn't want kids at the wedding, not even my daughter. But when I arrived at the venue, I saw her 2 kids and 6 nieces and nephews. I just laughed in her face and told her the wedding was off. I'm 38, and I was supposed to marry Addison, 40, earlier this week. We'd been together for 3 years and engaged for 6 months. Everything was fine until the engagement. Then issues started when we began discussing the guest list. I wanted my daughter, who's 14, to attend. Addison firmly insisted there were to be no kids at the wedding. This was strange, especially since she has 2 kids from a previous marriage and is very close to her 6 nieces and nephews. Most of our guests were parents, so I didn't understand her stance. We argued about it, but I eventually agreed, as long as her kids and nieces and nephews also weren't invited. Addison stuck to her decision. She claimed she wanted a stress-free wedding and didn't want to upset anyone with kids by making exceptions. Although it bothered me, I relented because she seemed so adamant, and it was a small wedding in my parents' backyard. I thought the kids wouldn't miss much. Everything changed a couple of days before the wedding. While at work, I got an email from Addison's younger sister, Kate. It included pictures of Kate's daughters in wedding outfits, asking for approval. I was confused until I realized that the email had been sent to the joint wedding account Addison and I used. Kate must have sent it by mistake. I quickly took screenshots before the email disappeared. Sure enough, minutes later, Addison deleted it. I was furious. She'd planned to bring her kids and nieces and nephews despite telling everyone it was a child-free wedding. That evening, I didn't confront her. I pretended nothing had happened. At first, she seemed nervous, likely suspecting I'd seen the email, but when I didn't bring it up, she acted normal. 2 days before the wedding, I decided to talk to my daughter. I wanted to check how she felt about Addison because I was already having doubts. Thankfully, I did. My daughter revealed that while Addison was kind to her before the engagement, her attitude changed afterward. Addison began ignoring her when I wasn't around. Since I have my daughter for half the month, this was a significant amount of time. My daughter didn't tell me sooner because she didn't want to ruin my happiness. But when Addison excluded her from the wedding, she felt it was a sign she wasn't wanted in my life anymore. Hearing this broke my heart. I realized I'd let Addison manipulate me into sidelining my own child. That was the moment I decided the wedding was off. I confronted Addison the day before the wedding. I didn't return home that night. She called and texted repeatedly, but I ignored her. I told my parents to let her know I'd see her on the wedding day. Instead of spending the evening at home, I spent it with my daughter, trying to make up for lost time. By the end of the day, we both felt much better. The next morning, I went to my parents' house, where the ceremony was supposed to take place. Some guests, including Addison's parents and sisters, had already arrived. To my surprise, all 6 of her nieces and nephews and her 2 kids, everyone under 12, were running around the place. When Addison saw me, she rushed over, likely to start explaining. But I cut her off. When Addison saw me, she hurried to the door and started explaining. She said she'd told Kate and Amelia that it was a child-free wedding, but they couldn't leave their kids at home. She also mentioned her parents thought it would be strange to have a wedding without her own children present. She rambled on with excuses, clearly thinking I was angry. I didn't interrupt until she finished. Then she noticed how I was dressed and started asking why I wasn't in my wedding clothes, where I'd been the night before, and so on. I just laughed in her face, pulled out my phone, and showed her the screenshot of Kate's email, the one she'd accidentally sent to our joint wedding account. Addison went silent. She knew she was caught and there was no way to talk her way out of it. She started apologizing, but it was far too late. At that moment, I decided to tell her what I'd done the day before. I told her I'd spent the day with my daughter and learned how she'd been treating her since we got engaged. I didn't want an explanation. I just said we were done. I made it clear that I wasn't going to marry someone who didn't value my daughter. It hurt because I'd never treated her kids any differently than my own, but it was obvious that neither I nor my family meant anything to her. I didn't wait for her response. I turned around, got in my car, and drove back to the hotel. Later that day, I woke up from a long nap to find countless messages from our wedding guests. Friends and family were confused, and Addison's parents were furious. I briefly explained the situation to my friends and family and left it at that. I visited my daughter and told her I'd canceled the wedding. I also promised to spend more time with her. Over the last few months, we'd grown distant without realizing it. Before, she would always come to me if there was an issue. The fact that she hadn't this time showed me how much I'd failed her. We both got emotional, but it felt good to reconnect. It's been 5 days since the wedding was supposed to happen, and now almost everyone knows why I canceled it. It wasn't just Addison's treatment of my daughter, it was also her dishonesty. For me, honesty is a cornerstone of any relationship. I've been lied to and cheated on before, and I know it always starts with small lies. This was a huge lie, and she thought she could get away with it. That's why I don't regret canceling the wedding, even at the last minute. Some might think it was dramatic, but I think it was fair. She planned to spring this kids at the wedding thing on me at the last minute, so I did the same with the cancellation. That said, her family is furious. They think I was unfair because I didn't give her a chance to explain herself. Addison, along with her family, has been messaging me non-stop. Her defense? She claims she couldn't outright ask me not to invite my daughter, but had her reasons. She also said it's insulting that after all these years, I didn't think our relationship deserved at least a conversation before ending it. She refuses to explain her reasons over text and says she'll only do it in person. Honestly, I can't imagine what kind of explanation would justify her excluding my daughter from our wedding. From what I know, there was never an issue between Addison and my daughter. Sure, I could have confronted her the day I found out, but I doubt it would have changed much. I still would have talked to my daughter, and I probably still would have canceled the wedding. Given how close it was to the date, the abruptness of the cancellation wouldn't have been much different. This subreddit is about wedding frustrations, so I'd love to hear. What would you have done in my shoes? Has anyone else canceled their wedding at the last minute, and why? Update 1. It's been 3 days since my original post, and I'm still staying at the hotel. Today I contacted Addison and told her she needs to move out of the house as soon as possible. After all, it's my house. I lived there before she moved in, so I think it's only fair that she be the one to leave now that we're done. I've given her until the end of the month to find a new place. In the meantime, I'll be staying with a friend, as staying in a hotel long-term isn't sustainable. I'm feeling much better about my decisions. My friends have reassured me that I made the right choice by prioritizing what's most important, being a father. I don't feel guilty about putting my daughter first. If someone has a problem with that, they don't need to be in my life. I won't apologize for choosing her. As for Addison's reasons for excluding my daughter, I honestly don't care anymore. If she can't explain them, then I don't need to hear them. At this point, I don't even want to see her. I've also blocked her parents and sisters because they were clearly aware of her plan and didn't warn me. That's deeply disappointing, especially since I thought I had a good relationship with them. I genuinely felt like I'd become part of their family. At least, that's what I believed until all of this happened. So far, I haven't responded to Addison, but last night I told her she needed to find a new place to live. I also made it clear that if she wanted to explain her reasons, she could, but it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done, and nothing she said would change things between us. That's all I had to say, and I haven't heard back from her since. For those wondering, no, I still don't know what caused Addison to change so drastically toward my daughter. I've talked to my daughter about it because I'm curious, but she doesn't know either. She told me she was just as shocked when Addison started acting differently. My daughter even tried to rebuild their relationship in the early stages after the engagement, but Addison stayed cold and indifferent to all her efforts. If anything, the issue seems to have been Addison herself. Based on what I've learned from my daughter, Addison is the one who changed. I know some kids struggle when their parents move on, but trust me, my daughter isn't one of them. To give some context, my daughter's mother and I were never married. We were together for 2 years before having her, but we broke up when she was 3 years old. My daughter barely remembers us as a couple. Besides, her mom has been remarried for 5 years now, so there's no lingering tension between us. I know for a fact that my decision to move forward and marry Addison didn't bother my daughter. They used to have a great relationship until recently. I'm not saying my daughter is perfect, although to me she is, but I know she's not a liar. She especially wouldn't lie about something like this. She knows how much I value honesty and transparency, so I trust her completely when it comes to this situation. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if Addison ever tells me her reasons. It's clear she doesn't plan to be honest about what's going on. She hasn't replied to my message, and I find that strange. She's always glued to her phone since she works from home, and her job requires her to stay active on it. Normally, she responds immediately, so I'm pretty sure she's seen my message and is choosing to ignore me. But honestly, it doesn't matter. All I want is for her to leave my house so I can return and live comfortably again. This hotel situation is far from ideal, and I'll need to go back to work in a couple of days. Update 2. It's been 3 days since I messaged Addison, and today she finally responded. She said she understood why I didn't want to see her in person, but insisted it was extremely important for us to meet so she could explain her reasons for not wanting my daughter at the wedding. Addison claimed this was to ensure I didn't misinterpret her actions, even though we're already separated. She also said she didn't want to be seen as the bad guy because, according to her, her reasons were valid and she never meant to hurt me. That last part felt ridiculous, considering her actions had already caused significant damage. I replied and made it very clear that I wouldn't meet her in person. I told her that whatever she needed to say could be done via text, and that was the end of it. About an hour later, she sent another message explaining her reasoning. According to Addison, the reason she didn't want my daughter at the wedding was because of something that happened during our engagement party. On the day of the party, my daughter wasn't feeling well. It was my time to have her that month, and I already knew she wasn't 100%. I told her she could stay in her room if she preferred, but she said she didn't want to miss the party, especially since it was being held at our house. Even though she felt unwell, she chose to attend for a little while. After I gave a toast, she excused herself and went back to her room. Naturally, some guests asked about her, but it wasn't a big deal. Apparently, Addison saw things differently. She claimed my daughter stole the spotlight by leaving the party. Addison said she went upstairs to check on her and overheard her laughing and talking on the phone with a friend. To Addison, this meant my daughter wasn't really sick and was pretending to avoid the party. Rather than addressing this with me or my daughter, Addison vented to her sisters, who have a reputation for stirring up drama. What could have been a simple misunderstanding spiraled into a major issue. After that, Addison started distancing herself from my daughter, convincing herself that my daughter secretly resented our engagement and might cause problems in the future. When I read this, I was disgusted. The fact that such a minor, misinterpreted incident led to Addison treating my daughter differently was beyond absurd. I didn't even bother responding to her. Instead, I spoke to my daughter about what Addison had told me. My daughter confirmed she had been talking to a friend on the phone after going upstairs that day. She explained that just because she was laughing and talking didn't mean she felt less sick. It's a perfectly reasonable point. Feeling unwell doesn't mean you can't talk or laugh with someone. Addison's reasoning was flimsy at best. It seems to me that she was insecure from the start and used this trivial incident as an excuse to stop pretending to care about my daughter. Reflecting on our relationship, I've realized there were other red flags. Addison often complained about not getting enough of my attention, especially when my daughter was around. While she showed patience and care with her own kids, she didn't extend the same effort to my daughter. She also had a subtle way of keeping me preoccupied, emotionally and with tasks, so I didn't notice how she was isolating me from my daughter. I never connected the dots because I was too invested in the relationship, but now I see how manipulative she was. I'm so grateful I ended things when I did. If staying with Addison meant sacrificing my relationship with my daughter, then it was never worth it. When I received Addison's message explaining her reasoning, I briefly considered responding to tell her exactly how ridiculous and petty she was for letting something so small ruin our relationship. But I quickly realized it wasn't worth my time or energy. For now, I've decided to ignore her until I absolutely have to see her again. Unfortunately, that might be sooner than I'd like because I need to return home to grab my clothes for work. I just hope she finds a place to live soon. While my friends have generously offered to let me stay with them, I'm eager to return to my house and put this whole chapter behind me. Update 3. 2 days after my last post, I went home to grab my clothes and a few other things. I had to move out of the hotel because it was getting too expensive. On my way to a friend's house, I decided to stop by and pick up what I needed. Since I had blocked Addison after her last message, she had no way of knowing I was coming. I figured it was a gamble, but I went for it. Unfortunately, Addison was home when I arrived. She looked upset to see me and clearly wanted to talk. I focused on gathering my belongings as quickly as possible, thinking the faster I finished, the sooner I could leave. However, she didn't make it easy for me to get my things. As I was about to leave, I told her she needed to find a new place to stay so I could move back into the house as soon as possible. I started walking to my car, but she followed me, talking the entire time. She apologized profusely for everything she'd done. She admitted she shouldn't have lied to me and should have been honest from the start instead of blowing the engagement party incident out of proportion. Addison admitted that she had been immature and exaggerated something so minor. She also said her sisters had played a big role in convincing her it was a bigger deal than it actually was. Recently, she'd even had a fight with them because she realized their advice had inadvertently ruined our relationship. That piqued my curiosity, so I asked her what she thought would happen when I showed up at the wedding and saw kids there, but not my daughter. Addison said she expected I'd marry her anyway because, in her words, our love should have been stronger than that. I told her that if she truly loved me, she wouldn't have put me in a position where I had to choose between her and my daughter. At that point, she was practically begging for a second chance. Addison promised she would make things work this time, both with me and with my daughter. Hearing that saddened me because it was far too little, far too late. As I reached my car, I told her I understood how she felt, but that this wasn't easy for me either. I explained that walking away from our relationship hadn't been simple, but I had to do it because nothing was more important to me than my daughter. I owed it to her to do the right thing. I could see that Addison was on the verge of tears, and I really didn't want to deal with that. I said a quick goodbye, reminded her to look for a new place, and left. I felt a little like a jerk for handling it that way, because seeing her in person was much harder than just messaging her. But it had to be done, and I don't regret it. For now, I'm staying with a friend while I wait for Addison to find a new place. Hopefully, in a couple of weeks, she'll have moved out, and I can start rebuilding my life. I know it'll take some time to recover from all of this, but I'm confident I made the right decision. The one silver lining in this whole mess is how much stronger my relationship with my daughter has become. We're back to where we were before the engagement. She's opening up to me about everything, and there are no secrets between us. It feels great. Today, we FaceTimed, and she was so excited talking about her day at school. In that moment, I knew all the stress and heartbreak had been worth it. We're even planning a beach trip in a few weeks. I've invited a couple of my friends with kids her age to join us because I think we both need a break and some fun after the chaos of these past few weeks. It's going to take time, but I'm optimistic about what's ahead. Update 4. Sometimes you don't realize the kind of bullet you dodged until some time has passed. Let me explain what I mean. A friend of mine, who's a lawyer, advised me to serve Addison with a formal eviction notice, partly to ensure everything was handled legally, and partly because it had been nearly 2 weeks since I asked her to move out, and she hadn't made any progress. With my friend's help, I filed the notice. Unfortunately, in my jurisdiction, tenants are given 60 days to vacate the property, so there wasn't much I could do except wait. I could have moved back into the house, but I didn't want to live with her for 60 days, especially not after everything that happened. As it turns out, staying away was probably for the best, because what ultimately happened was beyond anything I could have imagined. What Addison did to my house. A few days after I served her the eviction notice, Addison trashed my house. Thankfully, the damage wasn't as bad as it could have been. Considering how furious she was, I honestly think she might have burned the place down if it weren't for my neighbor. A neighbor heard loud noises and called the police. When they arrived, they found the mess Addison had made and detained her. If not for that intervention, I'm sure she would have caused even more destruction. The good news is that the police escorted her out of the house, which effectively ended the eviction process. The damage she caused also served as proof for the legal action I took afterward. I sued her for all the damages. The lawsuit I recently won the lawsuit, and am now waiting to collect the money she owes me. I've already repaired most of the damage to the house. If she refuses to pay, she'll face even more legal trouble for defying a court order. While the whole ordeal has been stressful, I feel incredibly relieved, knowing I avoided a bigger disaster by not marrying her. If this is how she acted now, I can't imagine how much worse things could have been if we were legally tied through marriage. What's next for Addison? The last I heard about Addison, her ex-husband is seeking full custody of their children, using this incident as evidence against her. I'm not saying Addison is a bad mother, but I also can't blame her ex for wanting to keep their kids away from her after all of this. That said, I'm not particularly interested in what happens in her life going forward. Unless it directly affects me or my daughter, I consider this chapter closed. Moving forward. This will likely be my final update regarding Addison. I've realized just how fortunate I was to get out when I did. This situation could have been much more expensive and complicated if we had gone through with the wedding. For now, I'm focused on rebuilding my life, my home, and my relationship with my daughter, which remains stronger than ever.